What's good, everyone? Today I'm going to be talking about 10 underrated manga that I think you should be reading. Everyone's heard of Dan, Chainsaw Man, Kagurabachi, but here are some lesser known works that I think deserve more popularity. This is not a list, these are not in order. The only rule here is that if I think it should be more popular than it is currently, and I won't include series that I've already reviewed. Manhwa also count. I'm gonna do a few honorable mentions just because I couldn't narrow it down to just 10. Kicking off the list, I have Fight Club Kindergarten. No, I did not say Kindergarten Wars. This is a very funny work. I think the gimmick will wear out eventually, but it still hasn't at this point for me, so I think it's pretty funny. Also honorable mention, I'm gonna have Surviving the Game as a Barbarian. This one is a little more popular, still not that popular, but it's a fun little manhwa. A lot of series have done this, being transported to a game world, but it just does a lot of things better than a lot of other works. And lastly, for honorable mentions, I have Kinnikuman, which I recently read, and you would think that Kinnikuman is super popular because it's a big name, and it is a lot more popular in Japan, but I think because of some translation issues, the popularity just hasn't really carried over to here. But I would highly recommend it. I've read through like 900, I don't know how many chapters Kinnikuman, like all 3 or 4 of them have, but I read through a lot of them and it was very enjoyable, so I'd highly recommend you check it out. Okay, on to the real list, and I'm kicking it off with Bambino or Bambino Secondo. I'm just gonna count them both as one. It's a fun slice of life cooking seinen manga which features his journey as a beginner cook in this really like high pressure cooking industry as he kind of becomes better, makes a lot of mistakes, and learns. I think in particular, the second one of this is very underrated for some reason. Not many people are reading it. I think there was also translation issues on it, but even the first one even won an award, so it's very good. Next, I have The Long Summer of August 31st. I think Kodansha has picked this up, so you can read it off of there, but this one's way more recent. It's a very heartwarming kind of romance rom-com type of thing, and the comedy is super sarcastic and very funny. It has great artwork. I wouldn't say this is like the best rom-com in recent times, but it's certainly very underrated. Next one, I'm going with Ozanari Dungeon. This one is really underground. It's this fantasy, adventure, action, slice of life type of work, which centers around Mocha the Barbarian. Despite having a decent amount of ecchi, which, you know, doesn't really bother me that much, but despite that, it's still a very enjoyable fantasy work. It does a lot of things right that a lot of fantasy manga really just don't do nowadays. Or I guess they do, some of them do, but a lot of them don't. And Ozanari Dungeon was actually successful enough to the point where it had 2 sequels, so I would recommend reading this. Next up, I have Aiki and Aiki-S. Okay, now I just said Ozanari Dungeon had ecchi, and Aiki has way more, and it's way more over the top with its ecchi, but I think this is genuinely a super funny work, and a lot of the etchiness is there for it to be funny. So I really enjoyed the humor here. It's pretty underrated. It is a little bit of a predictable martial arts type of work, but it's very funny. If you just want to laugh, out of everything on the list, I'd say this one is the one you would want. Next is Yureka. Yureka, although not the least popular on this list either, it is a work which again has sort of been lost to time. There have been a lot of works which have came along much past Yureka, which have done similar things. Maybe they were a little more flashy, maybe the graphics were a little more modern, or artwork was a little more modern, but Yureka was one of the best video game worlds ever created, and it still kind of is among one of them in manga. I mean, so it's a really good read. It does take a little bit to get started, but once you get there, it's pretty good. Next is Hareluya II Boy. I guess it's also Hareluya 1, but if you read Hareluya 1, it's like a couple chapters, I think, so same thing basically. Hareluya is another work which was sort of just lost to time. It has solid comedy. I really like the main character. Some of the side characters can lack a little bit, and there is some okay side characters, but a lot of them aren't as good. But if you like delinquent works with lots of action, you're gonna like this, and it's pretty funny. Next up, I have Yakitate Japan, another work I have reread recently, and this work was in Shonen Sunday, so it's not the most underrated work on this list, but I think just how unserious and funny this work could be, it just kind of like a reason why I think it's more underrated than it really should be. I think more people should know about this work. It's one of the funniest shonens out there, and the ending did leave a lot to be desired. It wasn't as funny. It did get a little wacky and weird and way too out there to the point where it wasn't funny anymore. But when the series was good, man was it good. Next, I have Eat Man / Eat Man the Main Dish, which is kind of the sequel. Eat Man is one of those series which is very Fist of the North Star inspired. You could also say it's, there's series who do this a lot, like Azumi does this. You have Cowboy Bebop, which kind of does this. You have Mushishi. There's tons of other works where you kind of have this character just wandering around and going through these episodic kind of plot lines. I think Blade of the Phantom Master or something along those lines. There's lots of series like this where they're just kind of out completing side quests. And Eat Man is one of those series, and I think it does this exceptionally well, where he's wandering around, his character is great. A lot of the kind of missions or whatever he goes on, not missions, but a lot of these side quests that he does are really memorable. And the Wasteland in general, it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool world. Next, I have Bokkou. This is an ancient Chinese war manga, which if you like works like Kingdom or Ad Astra or just like historical works in general, I would recommend this work. The series is just great at establishing this ancient Chinese environment. There's these war tactics which are super engaging and interesting. I would say that this series doesn't really stick the landing, which not a lot of manga really do, but even then I would still recommend it. And lastly, I'll say Nikaidou Hellgolf. Nobuyuki Fukumoto simply doesn't miss. He's one of the greatest manga authors ever, and his new work is painful, but in all the right ways. It says it's a golfing manga, which it is, but it's also a psychological manga, because we follow this guy who has this aspiration of becoming a pro golfer and getting everything he wanted, and he throws everything in his life aside to try to achieve this goal. And it's hard to watch. It is hard to watch, but it's an engaging read. And I also considered Gin to Kin for this, but I think Hellgolf is more underrated as it just came out. So I just made this video real fast because it took me like an hour or two to do, and it's just easier to do than a full review, and I don't have much time. So I also want to talk about some series that I maybe could have included in this list, but I also already reviewed. So I'm just going to go over them real quick from my YouTube page. I already reviewed Samurai Executioner. I guess that's because it wasn't the main series, but it's still pretty underrated. I think Angel Densetsu, I don't know if it's that underrated now, but that's another one that's potentially there. There was Takamitsu Samurai, which I think is pretty underrated, and I already reviewed that. Ryuma is probably pretty underrated. Saltiness is definitely very underrated. Other than that, I don't know if there's any other works I reviewed. Oh, Toge Oni is severely underrated in my opinion, so definitely check that one out. And other than that, I think that's it. I mean, there are other works which you could argue are a little underrated, but yeah. Thank you everyone for watching. Like and subscribe. Leave a comment about anything to do with manga and I'll get back to you. Now, I don't normally do videos like this. The reason I did a video like this was because I don't have much time. I'm going on vacation. So I'll upload this hopefully in a couple of days, and I'll let you guys know when I'm back. So no video for like 4 weeks from now, I think, probably. So yeah, if people like this video, maybe I'll do more like this. I don't really enjoy doing these videos that much because I don't really get to go in depth about these works, but it is nice to just like get some awareness to these works. If people watch this video, who knows, you might like some of the works in this video. So thank you for watching. If you like these works, if you want any more recommendations, you can leave a comment. See you guys next time.